Everyone, welcome to the first season of the Hardtech podcast. The Hardtech podcast is about bringing together innovators, builders, investors, and thought leaders all in the world of hardtech. In my background in starting software companies that I've scaled and exited, there's so much content out there for folks building in the software space and not as much in the hardware space. And that's exactly why the Hardtech podcast exists. This is a super exciting episode, mostly because Grant and I have built a personal relationship with the Waddell Group, a medical device focused consulting firm really focused on the project management side of taking products to market. I think it's going to be super interesting. Of all the relationships we have here at Glassport on the regulatory, the QMS side of things, we've never met someone or a consulting firm that really focuses on the project management side. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this.
I'll kick it off. I'm Bill Davis. Been with the Waddell Group. Here we go with the Waddell. Been with Waddell Group since the beginning of the year. I am their vice president of business consultants, basically. So I do most of the business development for the company. I also bring a lot of background in the healthcare services arena. So I've been 8 or 10 years working with health systems on consulting, value-based care, just moving the bar forward with healthcare systems. And then for my last 2 years prior to being with Waddell Group, I was helped launch a healthcare tech company. So we had a recruiting side because we all know there's a large deficit in nurses and primary care physicians and specialists. And then we also had a physician compensation side where we had physician compensation software to automate the software for the physicians, which we all know is very complex.
It's amazing how much math has to go in to figure out what they make. You're like, oh no, this is salary, right? And maybe a per operation bonus. You're like, no. Oh, sweet summer child, it is way worse than that.
So fun fact, we surveyed all the health systems, the largest of the health systems, 20,000 people. And 85% of the health systems are still using Excel spreadsheets to pay their physicians.
Well, Tom, how many people still use Excel for project management?
Way more than should.
It's a great segue.
So, yes. So part of our company does.
And who's our company? And who are you?
My name's Tom Waddell. The name of the company is Waddell Group. Our tagline is world-class medical device project management. So we're improving that to be world-class project management because we're expanding into healthcare compensation.
Love that.
So,
yeah.
So,
and actually, any healthcare stalled initiatives that we run into, we can help you with because Tom has the ability to, we have several great consultants with us now, and we can expand into those arenas as well with my background.
Right. Because it's probably 20 or 30% experience in the healthcare world, and then 70% project management.
Which is just eating your veggies correctly and doing it consistently.
Exactly.
I think it's really cool because whenever we were first organizing the podcast and getting to know you guys, and we just reached out, we were looking, for different growth partners and things like that. And whenever Grant and I originally had the conversation, he was like, "Oh, they do project management." Like, wait, that's really niche and unique. And
because no one sells just that, right? A lot of people sell regulatory consulting and project management, or insert a million other things here. But you guys are hyper focused in just project management.
And it's even a little more than that. So it's project management in medical device,
right,
and project management in healthcare, primarily in physicians' compensation.
Yeah.
So two very narrow niches.
And Tom, before we kicked it off, you were telling us about some really interesting stories and projects that you had worked on. I think it'd be interesting just to kick it off on one of the ones you found either the most wounds or battle scars or just interesting stories that you have.
Okay. Well, one of the things I do with this, one of the reasons probably we haven't grown to be 100 people is I always like to have a project myself. Working in the business versus working on the business.
It's really tough to balance, isn't it?
It is.
They took away my CAD license 9 months ago and I still haven't forgiven them.
So I always have a project. And what I tell people is I reserve the right to choose the coolest one. So the one I'm actually working on now is for a company called Mitivation. They make products that use infrared and near infrared light to change your body's metabolism in a way that helps particular issues that occur. The one that we're doing is to downregulate your metabolism so that it helps either prevent or recover from something called reperfusion injury. I should probably...
I say, for the listeners at home, I had to ask him twice about what this was the first time, so...
Okay, reperfusion. So perfusion is blood flow. Mm-hmm. So if you have a cardiac arrest and you stop having blood flow, you'll eventually die, but it takes a while. So like maybe 15, 20 minutes. If you get resuscitated within the first few minutes, your cells are there. They were upset, but they can come back.
They get along with it.
If you're over like 5 or 6 minutes, when you get oxygen back, the cells go into this hyper mode. Think of driving a car and running out of gas, and your foot goes to the floor, right?
And it stays there.
And it stays there until you realize you probably should pull it back. But in this analogy, your foot's on the floor, somebody puts gas in,
and it starts up.
And you start up and you just go.
You run in the car in front of you.
You run into a lot of things probably until you go, oh, I should probably pull back. So the reperfusion injury takes about 2 hours to get through all of the cascade of damage that this causes. And I won't go into the biochemistry because no one cares.
Actually, one of the four of us does care, but I'll ask later at dinner because I don't want to bore all the listeners.
Exactly. And one of the founders is a world-renowned human mitochondria expert. So he cares deeply.
So he understands why the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell that everyone in my generation learned in school, and we don't know why.
And it's actually useful in this case.
That's fantastic. So is this academic tech transfer, where was the original mechanism discovered, and how did it become a product? Because I think that journey is really interesting to talk about.
I don't remember who actually did the original discovery of this particular phenomenon of specific wavelengths of light can either increase your metabolism or decrease your metabolism.
I would love to be the fly on the wall when they first figured this out.
Yeah, it's like, are you kidding me? Light?
Mm-hmm. I was in a project that had thermal therapy.
Yep.
And it literally started with a doctor and a copper pipe running through a cat, pouring hot and cold water through a pipe with a funnel.
And so the light actually will increase your metabolism or decrease it?
Yes.
So How do I just go lay under that light right now?
Well,
I actually want both directions. Yeah.
There are a number of advertisements for Juve, Juvv or something like that, where they have a big bed, you lay in it, and it has
emits that wavelength.
That wavelength then increases the metabolism in your skin. So it's skin
rejuvenation. Yeah.
And it's got lower frequency light. So unlike UV that damages skin,
Nope. It's actually 635 nanometers is still near infrared.
Oh, interesting.
And 810 nanometers is actually in the infrared band.
Okay.
Those two will increase your metabolism.
Yeah.
750 nanometers and 950 nanometers will actually decrease your metabolism by about 40%.
And those are all longer wavelength than UV that damages your skin. I'm trying to make that correlation that
correct.
Too much energy damages it, and this is a Goldilocks zone.
This actually dumps thermal energy into your cells.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a kind of rule of thumb is you lose in skin, you lose about 90% of the energy through 1 centimeter.
Yep.
So you have to put enough light in there so it can go down about 5 centimeters.
Okay.
And the therapeutic dose of this light is somewhere in 10 microwatts
per
square centimeter.
Yep.
Exactly. So we use the down regulating wavelengths to reduce the metabolism in this period of time of reperfusion, where reperfusion injury cascade, where it actually it'll slow the cells down so they are normal for this period of time. The response only lasts a couple hours, so we keep a headset.
This therapy happening.
The therapy happening for about 2 hours. And we're using it on small children that have gone through cardiac surgery, and then some significant portion of those kids have a cardiac arrest later. And then so they're already in hospital. We'll have the devices right there. We'll be able to get the headsets on them fairly quickly. So we'll know, we'll be able to prove that this works in human beings the same way that we've shown that this works in large animals.
That's awesome. And again, this is ironic that it's kids, because the analogy that's running to mind is you want to wake up a toddler slowly. You don't shock them awake. Otherwise, you have a bad time. Same with these cells. You want to wake them up slowly, get them back into perfusion slowly.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So you want them to be, you want to slow them down.
Ease them back into the world.
When they be running, screaming. Yeah, toddler is perfect. So
Yep.
running, screaming, running into things.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So
I like that.
So how do you deliver the light? I think this is my first question, because being a primarily mechanical and secondary electrical, how do you get the light in?
All right. We're using class 4 lasers because there has to be a lot of it.
And lots of energy. Yeah.
Lots
Very
of
dense.
light. We're then delivering the light through glass fiber.
Yep. Through like a little fiber optic channel.
Right. And then we shine the light coming out of the fiber into some silicone waveguides,
Mm-hmm.
and it bounces off of the surface the way that it's designed. And then, so it comes in sideways.
Yep.
And then bounces down into the skin, all probably 85 degrees.
Awesome. So this is all transcutaneous, right?
Yes. All external.
Yep.
There's nothing, we're not inserting light anywhere that doesn't need to be.
Yeah, where the sun doesn't
Where the
shine,
sun
right?
doesn't shine. Thank you.
Or in your nose or your ears, or, I suppose we could do something like that, but it needs to be diffused enough so that we get enough light in to be able to have a therapeutic dose in the brain for the entire brain.
Yep. So you need to get enough surface area that's affected at a low enough power you don't cook the skin.
Exactly.
It's all about, what is it? The poison's in the dose, not the medicine.
And it's based on the wavelength, because if anybody for the engineers in your audience, so there is a skin depth.
Yep. Per wavelength.
Per wavelength. So we can put in about an eighth of a watt per centimeter squared for each of the two wavelengths
That you're shooting for.
that we're shooting for. And we have 32 square centimeters of
Contact area that you're
of
shooting
contact area that we put in. One of the fun issues is the hair absorbs this light really readily, so we have to take all the hair
in.
off.
You
of
mean
the
this
kids.
pigmented thing that we have on our head?
Yeah.
Yep.
So-
it is so crazy how that happens.
It's actually not the pigment; it's the protein. So,
Really?
So protein absorbs
This
infrared.
wavelength of
And,
light.
Well, any from probably 600 to 1200, it absorbs.
Because it's trying to keep us warm. I mean, hair and fur was originally invented to keep us all warm.
Yeah.
Doing its job.
And
Right.
so when in this company's journey, did you start working with them? Did you come in sort of midway through? And it just is like really cool how, like, obviously as a PM, you're pretty in depth on what exactly the product does and how it's being implemented.
Guy who actually got it going, and his partner were both at Wayne State in Detroit to
Okay.
begin with. And they had a program where they brought in a CEO, what do you call it? Kind of an interim CEO.
Oh,
kind
like
of
a
residence, CEO in residence kind of program.
Oh, God. Were they through like a studio?
No,
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 because
it was through Wayne State.
that's right. So the university brought in a executive in residence or CEO in residence.
Correct.
Okay. So this
Yes.
is like a tech transfer project process.
Yes, they were trying to bring this out because it's just really cool.
Yep.
And I knew that CEO, and he's like, I can raise money and do what CEOs do, but I can't do the project.
There's a lot of hardware running around.
Right. You need to develop the light. You need to transfer it to something that will actually be able to put the light into someone's head without burning them.
And control it so it never
and
burns
control
them.
it so it never does. So, and have safeguards. So we have at least one, there's probably 3 safety switches in there so that, and then what's the model you're going to use? So razor blade.
Yep. How do you
business
price it?
model. How do you price it? And then infants are probably not the first product we should have gone after.
I was actually waiting to ask that, and I was going to do it off the podcast because I was like, man, pediatrics is so hard to start. There's a huge need, but
There's
it's
a
a
huge
lot of emotional red tape.
And there's a lot of emotional red tape because it's an infant that's now going to have brain damage for its entire life.
If you mess this up.
If you don't do anything.
That's okay. So you have a need that's already exists. You're going to do no less damage that's already going to happen.
And we work with a couple of heads of cardiac programs for children's hospitals, which is where we're going to do the clinicals.
Clinical.
And they're both, there's nothing that you can't do anything. One of the ways that you can reduce the reperfusion injury is to cool people down.
I was just going to ask, can you cool them down?
You can't,
but that has its own damages.
Cool someone enough in 2 hours so the damage is done. So there is no treatment. So if a child has a cardiac arrest after cardiac surgery and they can't resuscitate them within the first few minutes, they're in big trouble.
It's big trouble, yeah. Because again, this is that whole.
So this is an unmet need.
Even though there's an opportunity with this product too.
Yes.
Past that. Wow. Okay.
So it's just a heartbreaking issue.
Yeah. And you guys at least have an attempt at making a difference. That's the worst case. And the best case, you have an awesome solution.
We've already proven this works on on large animals. So
So I'd love to talk about that process in project management. Is how did you break down the steps? Because again, going from I know that this wavelength of light changes metabolism, awesome science discovery, to hey, we're selling this and people are paying for it to save their kids' brains during surgery. That's like eating the elephant and no one knows where to stick the fork in. How do you, as the program and product manager, go through the steps of identifying, what are the breadcrumbs that lead us to that whole elephant?
Well, pretty early on, came in, it's like, okay, can we make this? And can we actually inject enough light to do the
science,
the therapy? Mm-hmm. Proved that. Or, all the theory was right. And then we set up the studies for doing the animal testing.
And what animal model were you guys using?
Porcine.
Yep.
Pigs. And it works.
No, that's awesome. Again,
it's a bimodal distribution. If you treat them with the light, then they don't
have as much brain
their
damage.
Brains work. If you don't treat them with the light, it's just massive damage.
And this is what you want to see in animal testing. It's the same thing we've done with a device where we had to go do parts on animal testing. We'd get organs in to test on that we were running some experiments on. And it's when you get those night and day results in animal testing, it makes the narrative better. And you can start telling the safety and efficacy challenges in verification in the lab. Hey, if our device failed this way, we saw that it didn't make the therapy work, but it produced no more risk. Or our device failed and created this other problem in our animal model. This is a risk we now have to accept. Right. And I think risk acceptance is another thing to talk about.
So far, we don't see any risks.
No, that's awesome.
And we put that into our IDE submission, and the FDA didn't really like us to say that. So there's always risks. I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
I think your major risk is your device breaks for some reason, and what they thought was going to be great therapy doesn't get applied, but it's no worse than before.
How did we choose which therapy to go after first?
Well, and how did you go from lab to what was your next engineering test or test, and how did you go to clinical? Like, what were those breadcrumbs?
The two really biggest issues were where do we go first?
Mm-hmm.
We realized we had 7 different opportunities to try this out on human beings.
Yep.
And I created a map and said, here's how long it's going to take and the amount of money and
like a matrix comparing the weights.
Matrix of I did.
It's what you have to do to make complex choices.
So we decided that for children, we can actually therapeutically help in their entire brain. Mm-hmm. So 95+% of their brains will be therapeutically
they'll get the therapy.
Lightened up. Yeah, they'll get the therapy.
Preserved.
Yes. This also, by the way, and there's about 30,000 kids that can have this happen with them each year.
Mm-hmm.
Not a huge market. If you look at the number of people more my age that are having cardiac arrests and get brought back,
bigger number.
There's about 800,000 people a year in the United States that have a cardiac arrest.
Yep.
Half of them are resuscitated. About 80% of those people, so 320,000 people, have brain damage
of some level from resuscitation
of reperfusion injury.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How soon do you need the device after you've had that event?
It probably will help, even if you put it an hour afterwards.
Okay.
I'd say it's interesting because it's actually not slowing down. I'm sure. Have you guys? Let me ask. Have you looked at putting it on someone the moment of cardiac arrest to slow down their metabolism, to keep the cells healthy longer, and then also slow them down during reperfusion? Because that seems like the golden ticket. I have heart attack, slow me down.
and I'll make a distinction between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest.
Cardiac arrest.
So just there is no reperfusion problem if the person has a cardiac arrest and they die.
Right.
So, and it's pretty fast. The first thing you want to do is get them back.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to resuscitate them. You don't want to be messing with some light thing or
shave their head. I was just going to ask how long do you?
Don't bother. So
it's just get them back.
Get them alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then figure out how to get this headset on them.
Got it. That's the order of operations.
That's the order of operation. Mm-hmm. It is an emergency. Someone's dying.
Yeah.
So get their heart working again. So the big market is going to be post cardiac arrest
therapy.
Yep. If you think about it, the same sort of thing happens in stroke.
I was just going to ask that.
There's about 700,000 people that have a stroke every year.
Or small aneurysms kind of thing.
Any situation where they're going to lose blood flow to
and
a particular part of
their brain.
And then they'll get it back.
Interesting.
So another one will be traumatic brain injury.
Yep.
So I'm walking through the things that we were considering.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then there's probably 3 or 4 more. I don't know how many I said already. But
a big list. And we had to go make the matrix of how much money can we make.
So it's a platform.
Yeah.
Where should we prove it? And some of them were pretty even with each other. We're like, okay, somebody my age has a cardiac arrest, brain damage. Okay, I've had a really good life. Baby had cardiac surgery and they're set up to have brain damage for the rest of their life.
It's area under the curve problem.
Yeah. So we went that way.
Well,
and said, this needs to be solved. It's probably not the right one corporately to
financially,
make the most money.
But it might be the easiest sale. It might be the easiest to get in market, right? It might have the biggest need, the biggest area in the curve.
That was part of it. But again, all of those were somewhat level. And we're like, okay, if we're going to be humanitarians.
Yeah, sure. Well, all the things equal, we can start here.
And
we can start here.
And from like a clarification perspective, like if you start at the pediatric level.
It's all downhill from there.
Is it much easier to then go to the adult level as opposed to starting at the adult and moving back to, or is it all the same?
From the fun we've had with getting the pediatric devices done and moving forward and getting through the FDA, any of the other pathways look pretty fun.
Sure.
But I'm not there yet. Yeah, so when I get through the second one, I'll give you a comparison.
Sure, but could it be equally as hard, right?
At the moment, it's a challenge.
Sure.
So it is it was a difficult choice to choose which of those. And this one's probably the smallest market size.
Yeah.
But again, if we prove this, then everybody's going to say, okay, there's an enormous,
time to copy paste this into all the applications.
There's probably 5 million a year of people just in the US that could have some part of this technology used on them. So it's a revolutionary.
Well, and this is just the first application. Right, of the core mechanism. Right. That's the big part, right? If you can control that. But
as a platform, there's probably 5 million people in the US a year that would have it would make sense to have this therapy applied.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So it takes a while. You got to get through clinical, all that.
Yeah, you have to build hardware. I mean, no one's ever taken time to do that.
No, we build hardware. So that was the first big fun issue to, okay, what are we actually gonna treat?
Mm-hmm.
Who are we gonna actually treat? Not what. Who are we gonna treat? And then, all right, how are we gonna deliver enough light? So
how do you get it?
How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And getting light out of lasers with 2 wavelengths can be really interesting. Yeah. There were a bunch of challenges with that. We had to find the right vendor to make the laser systems.
Mm-hmm.
And all the light piping and everything.
How do you control it enough? Then what's the mechanism of actually getting it from the device sitting over here through light fibers that isn't going to break each time you do that?
Or change intensity if it's kinked too many times this is the fun part of engineering.
Right. And then we're going to have a razor blade. So we have 24 glass fibers that have to get connected and put
into a connector.
perfectly next to each other. Because if you
Have them at
if you go like this and you're not transferring the light correctly,
and if they're at an angle, it all bounces back. I mean, glass is this weird thing. It'll conduct or bounce light, depending on what angle you hit it.
and the fibers are 100 microns,
Oh, just huge bullseyes to hit.
really easy to match those.
Yeah.
So the connector development was really fun.
I bet your connector vendor loved you guys.
For some reasons, yes, but we haven't bought a ton of them either.
Yeah, my joke is they will love you at the end because I'm
They
sure
will
those are
love us at the
pricey.
end.
But I bet during development they loved you guys.
Right. And then the development of the waveguide, how do we have a 40 durometer medical grade silicone
That bounces the light at the right angle most of the
right
time.
way, and that actually doesn't have a significant number of hot spots so that you actually do burn somebody. That would
Yep.
be really bad.
Or have occlusions in it that end up heating up the waveguide itself because you're hitting all the light.
Yeah. No, we didn't worry about that one. It's medical grade silicone, and
You had a pretty good control process for
we
that.
have a very good control
That's good.
process on that.
Yeah, because bubbles in that, any even small bubbles at that wavelength will bounce the light around inside.
Back to that medical grade. Yeah.
Yep.
They
They figured out that process.
I haven't seen a bubble yet.
Yeah.
Grant, I know.
That'll be part of the control.
Oh, go for it. No, feel free.
So that was pretty early. Who are we going to treat? What's the technology that we're actually going to get there?
Mhm.
We really wanted LEDs because the regulations on LEDs are way less than shining class 4 lasers
Directed at
infants.
people.
But there wasn't an LED solution. So there is now.
Oh, interesting.
So we will at some point shift from
Laser and
class
optics.
4 laser and optics to LEDs with different means of-
Localized light pipes, basically.
But that's the decision we made at the time. We're moving forward, and then how do we set this up so not only then do we get the FDA to say yes, but then I'm always looking at what's the end game. We want to make this what everybody, the Kleenex of,
You want everyone to want to use it.
right, standard of care, I believe is the right
That's
terminology.
it's the medical term, but it's one of those who's your end buyer versus
Mhm.
who's your end user versus who's your end recipient,
Right.
right? Because like in medical, this isn't straightforward. When you're building iPhones, I am the buyer, I am the user, I am the everything. When you're selling in
Mhm.
medical, someone else is choosing to buy this thing.
Mhm.
Someone's actually having to install it and physically use it, and some patient is getting all the benefit.
Right.
And a payer at an insurance system has figured out how to use the time value of money that this treatment is worth all the other treatment we pay later, and we'll pay for this.
Right.
That's interesting. So there's also a layer of like a business model development as you're doing the product management.
Always.
Yes.
Mhm.
Always.
Someone's got to make money.
Right.
Well, we need to make money so that we can continue to expand.
Mhm.
The healthcare system has to have this cost less than it would be if the problem persisted.
Mm-hmm.
The extra cost for a child to have brain damage throughout their life is over $1 million.
I'm shocked it's that low.
Mhm.
I said over,
I say area under the curve is a compound interest, hell of a drug.
huge. The additional cost for, I think, the first 2 months of old person
Mhm.
to have reperfusion injury and then brain damage is over $100,000. So we're not going to get pushed back on too hard for selling the razor blade portion of this
At a decent
headset
clip, yeah.
for something that's well less than $100,000.
Yeah. A real 5-figure number is still a steal for them.
Mhm.
Well, and we'll need to provide them a lot of evidence for that, I'm sure. The cost savings, which is what a lot of healthcare systems look at. Yes.
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 So speaking of
because
healthcare
they have
systems-
to,
Sure. Yeah. Maybe I could.
Oh, so this is a
because
great
they
pivot.
have to, but this is actually going to save a lot of money for the healthcare systems.
Yeah. Integrated over time.
And
Right.
Bill, back last week, you came in and we were chatting a little bit about that around the healthcare systems, either the capital lost or they're still managing things on spreadsheets. Could you just refresh us on that and dive more into that?
There goes a lot. There's a lot that goes into the physician pay program for doctors, and it's constantly changing, which, they only, the fee schedules change, the provider's pay structure changes. So those expenses are just always ongoing. And as they try to aggregate, for the doctors, what their pay plan is going to be, that's also another problem that they're experiencing. And there are compensation systems out there that will automate, SaaS products that will automate and pay these docs. And then it takes a lot of the regulation out because humans aren't entering this data. It's just flows.
Or
right
the
into
human
it.
data that's entered is at least fact checked, right? Like there are rules that I've like, this doesn't look right. Are you sure?
It's always audited.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot. There's a lot lower chance of risk. With the spreadsheets, you have the risk of overpaying providers and you have the risk of underpaying providers. Both are hard to claw back and catch back up with.
And underpaying people is a real legal headache.
It
like
is.
When you underpay a human, coming from a guy that runs a business, like you don't want to do that. You always want to err on overpaying them on accident because if you underpay someone, that's the one place the law has no patience.
Totally. And just to be clear, you're talking about like major healthcare systems using Google Sheets or Excel to pay the doctors. Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Are they even advanced enough for Google Sheets?
It's assuming they're on G Suite.
It's Microsoft 1998. We all know this.
It's definitely Microsoft.
Running on a Windows XP machine that they pirated the 98 software for.
Yep.
Why do you think that healthcare system is still in that spot? Given, they obviously have the capital to subscribe to any SaaS software they could or what have you.
And the volume to justify it.
Great lead in, because that's exactly why we come in, because the health systems are like this giant ship. They're really hard to turn. And they're all siloed, they're in their silos. So to get somebody to understand that they need this software where they're going to get the return on their investment 2 years, 3 years, instantly. And so there's no reason not to use the software. It's just a matter of getting everybody aligned to make that decision. And then a lot of the systems I worked with, 10 years ago, they had 3 people in a department working on the physician comp. They had 300 doctors. Fast forward to today, they have, 3,000 doctors. They still have those 3 people managing those same doctors
with Excel spreadsheets.
with Excel spreadsheets.
Saved locally and then emailed to each other.
Yeah. So now you're seeing the errors increase, you're seeing everything and the costs increase. So after these systems finally do, join with a physician comp automation software, then we can come in and help structure the department moving forward in a practical way that they can actually have structure, break down some of those silos, and then
like a playbook that they all agree to and play from. This weird concept in team building and project management of like, here are the rules of engagement, everybody. You're all allowed to be happy or upset based on these rules. And this is how we're going to manage this. We will make mistakes, but if we have this North Star, we'll at least march in the right direction.
Exactly. So we can come in, help them with their software, make sure they're using that to its fullest potential. And then we can also help their department so everybody's working at their highest level instead of taking phone calls from the docs why all this is wrong. So they can work at the highest level of their licensure and move forward and be successful. And, we can work with them for 6 months to a year to make that happen.
And it's all about efficiency and scale, right? You guys are training them. Hey, we used to do it in Excel because there were 3 of you and 300 doctors, and this was totally manageable. This has now grown into a monster. The new SaaS tool or the software we can help implement is difficult to wrap your head around at first. It's got lots of options. It can only let you do it their way. You can't do your old tricks you used to do to balance the sheets. You got to play by the rules. But I promise you, eat your veggies, right? The topic we keep bringing up.
It's true.
If you do it now, you'll be happy and healthy later.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're going to be healthy. And, we know several different vendors that we work with. And
I was going to ask, are there specific ones that are better than others, or your top 3?
There are top 3 that I.
Or can you mention
I'm
them?
not going to tell you.
I'm not going to tell you, but because there's probably 8 to 10 that are good, but
Sure.
then there's a top 3 that we think lead the market,
Yep.
and that their software is the safest software out there that's automated well, that's gonna work well for large systems. And then maybe I might take you to another system if you're 300 docs rather than 20,000.
And you have one person running the system instead of 3.
Exactly.
Yep. And this is unique butterfly. We tell this forever. Everyone says, what's a product development journey? I'm like, well, there's a process. It usually goes through these steps. It usually takes somewhere around this time. But every product is a unique butterfly. Each company has their unique tech. They have their unique leadership and management style, and they have unique market and regulatory needs. And each one is a blend. And what might be poison for one of my clients would be a great fit for another one when I'm introducing software vendors or project management vendors, or a fun one to talk about. And I want to bring up to you guys. We have a firm locally that does Imagine an actuary, but as a consultant for medical device billing. So they have already risk. They're here and they go in and look at all your clinical data, all your risks, and then go run the actuary science at the back end to help you convince payers what it would save them.
Wow.
So they're actually, I lost our director of operations to them. They stole Tamara from me. We're still great friends. But she's over there now helping them scale, similar to what Glassboard's been doing. And they just run a really cool service that they take even nerdier nerds than engineers and actuarial scientists and then apply them fractionally for good.
They're nerdier.
They really like trains even more than we do. It's incredible. But no, it's it's really cool that they've been able to find this niche that all these early stage med device companies, either inside of a large player, right, like a Medtronic or a Stryker that are the innovation teams, or an actual startup or small to medium business, were struggling to get their point across to the payers because the payers are all talking actuary science. That's all they talk. They only speak risk in the very particular way it's formatted. And they realized, and they were on the inside, they were on the other side of the table and realized they could be a great service translating from company innovation to risk in a way that was a positive light. And so it really helped this, English to English translation, as we say, in a way that became very valuable.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And again, I'm sure you deal with similar things in the project management side of things of you feel like, at least 25% of your week is telling two people the same thing differently.
Not that high. Thank God. So
do you get SaaS tools that bring that number down?
And Grant, maybe this is a piggyback, maybe it's not, but I know that whenever we first got engaged with these guys, like you were really excited. And I would maybe like to paint the picture on, obviously Glassboard is the one that runs like the Hardtech podcast, and that's a part of it in terms of like how the Waddell Group works with Glassboard.
Yeah.
And like how because you would think from like a high level, project management, there's project managers on.
We do. We have those.
You have project managers.
Yeah. Right. But like how does what they do is specifically like different, and how does it integrate and so on?
Well,
like areas that you see opportunities
and
for.
I can tell the story of why I got so excited. So we do project management, and over the years, we learned that it's way more important than we even thought it was. It is like the multiplier, like the interest rate on your loan. Yes, borrowing more money is more expensive, but the interest rate really turns that knob pretty heavy. Good project management is like having a low interest rate. And we have clients occasionally that have trouble getting out of their own way. I think that's the best, kindest way to put it. And we are too close to them to tell them what's going on. We are too close. We've been with them since the beginning. We have too casual of a relationship, and they feel like, they can fight us on it, and it's no big deal. And we'll push back, but we won't get listened to. Like, no, it's fine. We'll do this. And I really need a fresh set of eyes sometimes to come in and manage the project, to not only make sure the client knows I'm not just saying this to make more money or to prolong the project, but no, really, this is the best. This is going to save us later. And sometimes I need my team to get yelled at. If we're the ones program managing ourselves, like you and I talked about this before the podcast started, cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Yes.
How are you at managing your own personal to-do tasks?
Not as good as I am at managing other people's.
Yep. We have the exact same thing.
I let myself off the hook way too often.
Yep. And so that's why I got so excited.
That might be human.
One of these things that it's a human thing, and having a third-party perspective can both save us from headache, from we're the ones causing problems we're not seeing, or the client from getting a very fresh set of eyes who the person who's not getting paid doing the work is still saying this thing, if it's a hard, difficult choice to make today.
Just the idea of project management. One of my former partners used to say, if your project manager makes one good decision, they've paid for themselves completely.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you're burning $100,000 a month and your project goes out
one more month
or 2 more months, why didn't you have a project manager on there?
So let's talk shop. This is really fun.
The probability of having those big push outs is way less because you actually know where the problems are going to be along the line.
It's all about hiring the right team.
And you get them early.
You actually create a risk register.
I haven't heard that term before.
You haven't?
I mean, we talk about risk and risk matrices and risk acceptance, but the term register is ringing for me first.
Sure. And risk burn down, do you have
that? Risk burn down, yeah.
Okay, yeah. When are you going to know if this is there or not?
Yeah. How do you know this is real or not?
Right.
And how mitigatable is the risk?
Right. And then somebody has to go, I'm sure we got 80% of the risks really because we don't know. And then do a lot of work to go figure out what the other 20% is. Because if you don't know what the risk is and you don't know how to mitigate it and you then run into it later.
Bad day.
Bad day.
Again, FDA doesn't mind if you have risk and you accept it. They really don't like it when you get surprised.
I think I have a little bit of a correlation. So whenever I was running my first startup all in, we used an outsourced development partner, sort of like Glassboard, but for the software side, and built a super close relationship with the CEO of the software group. We would go to Pacers games and things like that. We were pretty close, and so on. I was a younger founder, and so he was like a mentor of mine. They invested in the company and so on. And there would be times where maybe I would have some conviction around where the product should go. And he also had conviction on where the product should go. And we're both, obviously I'm paying them to do the work. However, like they're also invested now. So, both of us succeeding is that the company ultimately succeeding. And so it would have been really nice to have a third party PM come in and say,
are you sure about that?
It's probably like yes to about 25% of what you're saying, which was me, and about 75% of what he was saying, which was him, and then bring that together into more of a concise. I really think that third party aspect really brings a lot of value, more specific to like that more interpersonal issue that you can come up with. I mean, Grant, you kind of just mentioned that, like having that outside view, because the project management role is so critical, like you just mentioned.
When it's
one
so
thing
emotional,
goes off, right?
It's so emotional. As much as it's technical and eating your veggies and making the right risk choices and lists, it's emotional of being able to call a spade or see the future without having the rose-colored glasses or the pessimism glasses. The other one, I was like, we'll get clients that have way too much pessimism and like, well, we're frozen in action because there may be risks we don't know about. I'm like, well, we're not going to find out until we get there. Got to drive by Braille a little bit.
Well, and you'll also find engineers either give you wildly aggressive schedules that they're going to be able to do.
They're never going to hit it.
Or, and you got to know that. And the others are the great sandbaggers. They don't want to take much risk.
Well, no, they want to take zero risk. And this is the worst case scenario. And it's going to take a decade to get there. We're only making goldfish.
I can't promise this by this time because here are the 5 things that can go wrong. And I can't predict those.
And I don't know where they are. It could be a year, could be 10 years. I don't know.
Right. So, but you got to come up with something.
Sure. And of course, if you want the Goldilocks version of that, you just go to Glassport. They're going to be, I was kidding.
Throw me right under the bus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but having somebody that's been through this a few times, okay, you're probably going to be about here.
And you're probably going to experience about this much growth throughout the project and the timeline and the cost. Right. Here's on what we've seen in this kind of industry. Here's what you don't know at the beginning. Right. The worst case, it goes up by 4x. Best case, it gets to 1.25. Average, it's about 2x what you think it is today. Right. And that's, insert industry here has their own multiplier curve of, it's always a bell curve. It's always stats. Do you know the team here in town, SEP, Software Engineering Professionals?
I don't.
They're a really cool software dev team. They're about 30 years old, 175, 180 people. Rumman was on an episode earlier, so make sure to listen to that one. But they've got a really cool Monte Carlo simulation pricing model where they'll do some early sprints to go plan the project and write down their goals and their sprints.
Right.
And then they relate it to past projects in this big database they've got.
Smart.
Of, this kind of product, this is the growth we should expect on sprint plans. This is the timeline growth. This is the amount of features that the client doesn't tell on average. And it's all, here's the average, here's the 1% outlier on the top, here's the 1% outlier on the bottom. And they show the client this statistical distribution. We're quoting in the middle. Here's where it statistically is. Let's get started. And it's such a powerful tool because they're like, hey, this is just data and this is just stats. And you're probably not going to be the top 99th percentile on overruns. You're probably not going to be the bottom 1 percentile either. Let's plan for standard deviation around the middle here.
So I love that. So the project management things that cause failures in projects, you don't plan it very well. You don't manage it well. And then the last one,
I can't wait for this.
Scope creep.
Scope creep. And my favorite part about scope creep is if it's not in the PM's position to control, they're along for the ride. It's my favorite game. Because you can scream from the rooftops, this is a terrible idea. This scope creep is going to murder us. And if person in charge says, we're going to the top of the mountain, you say, aye, Captain, and you get your bag, you start hiking.
But you have to tell them.
Oh, yeah. In very exquisite detail.
And say, here you go. I always laugh because people are like, well, who makes the most scope creep in a project? Everybody says, well, the marketing group. Of course they do. They know what the new things are, but they're not. So the engineers like adding their little flavor to everything.
Side quests. We call those side quests.
Little tiny little changes constantly over a project is way worse than adding some big feature later.
Yep.
So I mean, maybe it's not worse.
But no, you can at least quantify the big feature before you do it. The little ones are death by 1,000 cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a really great project manager has their the definition of the project nailed down.
Yep.
And here's what this
In
is.
MedDevice, intended use statement.
Here it is. This is what it is. And any deviations from that, they're not thrown. You can't say you can't make any deviations because the market might come back and say,
We really need that feature.
we have to have that because whatever competitor over
And
here
in
just
today's
did that.
world, I have to add IoT to that thing. That is the current in MedDevice hot button. I have to add IoT. I have to collect data. I have to run AI on it, and I have to go sell that later. That is currently all I hear.
Actually, I went the exact opposite for the Inovation device.
That's good.
So I said, it doesn't even have software and it has firmware.
Yeah, it just
So-
has embedded software. Yeah.
And if we need to upgrade the firmware, we can submit that, and then that will get approved. But it doesn't interact. There's no
Cybersecurity.
There's 62304. We're
We're
not
getting
even-
a lot of requests for this, and for us, it is blowing up timelines. But I'm finding markets are demanding it, and my clients are willing to go put their money where their mouth is to go get this because it's the future of if it was worth doing, it was worth writing down, which is ironic because it sounds just like the FDA process. If you're going to do this, you should write it down.
Right.
And it's leading to a big, what I saw in the consumer electronics market in the teens, right? Nest started it with all the smart thermostats and smart light switches and light bulbs, and then door locks, and insert everything here. This has come from medical, and it's coming fast.
Yes. When is it appropriate? So
Well, not your first product.
not the first product.
I think that's the answer is V2, absolutely. Let's do it. But make
Yes,
sure we
you
can
wanna
have
be able to
revenue
charge,
positive.
You can have all of that fun stuff. So yes. So those are some other parts of the game of somebody has to be looking at what's going to cause this thing to fail later down the road.
Yep. And it shouldn't be the engineers.
Where are the regulatory risks? Well, if it's an engineer, they need to be responsible for the schedule. How many of them are that good? But that's what I hire is engineers, but we love the project management portion of it, and that's the responsibility. It's not the engineering.
Well, they're not the individual contributor engineer. That's where I'm going
Right.
And we inside Glassport, even within a project, have different roles that you may be an individual contributor on another project.
Sure.
But if you're PMing this one, you shouldn't be an individual contributor on it.
Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah. No, it's interesting as we got, I got older in my role here at Glassport and we got bigger. I found there's a big difference between management and leadership. And those are totally different skill sets I didn't realize are unrelated. And I'm terrible at management. I'm halfway okay at leadership, I think. People tend to want to go do stuff.
I think he's being modest.
But management, I'm so bad at. It's wild. And we have Sean, who's our chief COO here at Glassport, and he is so darn good at managing people and making them enjoy the process. And it's this difference that is in project management, you actually need to simultaneously play leader, that you're getting everyone rallied behind the idea and they're following you into the darkness because they trust that you've got everyone's best interest at heart, even if you disagree with them on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And that you also still have to become the manager. And that's got to be a really tough role to fill both. How do you hire for that?
I have that wasn't a rhetorical question.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that was I want to take notes. The rest of all the listeners do too.
All right. I only hire people that have managed enough projects to have blown one up.
That's not that hard in hardware, but yeah.
Well, even software, if you get in through there and you extend out way beyond where you were supposed to go, that's a failure.
Yeah.
So the people that I hire need to understand that you have to define the project really well. You have to manage the bejeebers out of it to make sure the planning and everything goes the way it's supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to manage the scope creep. And the way I find that out is I ask them about their best project and I ask them about their worst project.
And you want to hear the real horror story on the worst one. You want to hear the real gates of Hades.
I want to hear from both of them. I want to hear what they learned.
Yeah.
So for the best one, here, part of this was luck. I landed the very best project team I've ever had.
My client was very clear with all their needs.
And they were responsive. I had these issues and they were solved within days.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones that just completely blew up, what did you learn? So if people are if people are honest, here's what I contributed to this.
Yeah. Here's how I didn't fix the thing I should have fixed.
And even for the great ones, it's like, I probably had 10% for this. I had the dream project team.
Yep.
And the dream management that went this way. Over here, I made these 3 decisions that were disasters.
Yep.
And it took us 6 months to clean this up.
Yep. Or I didn't catch this thing that I should have caught. And
it happens.
And we all do that, right? And it's one of these things that it can be discipline. It can be emotional.
Mhm.
There's 101 reasons that you might miss something in PM or management that it's not a straightforward of I didn't check in every week. It is I liked the engineers so much. I trusted their enthusiasm. They'd solve this critical problem instead of calling a spade and say, hey, it's too late. We got to cut this feature.
On one of my disasters, I had 2 parts of a project that were both equally could be a problem.
Yep.
And for one, this guy was really awesome. This engineer was spectacular. And the other, the group that was working over here was just, they were a train wreck waiting to happen. So I spent 90% of my time over here working to make sure that the train wreck didn't occur.
And you kept them on the rails.
I kept them on the rails. And this over here blew up.
Because he still needed some touch.
He needed 25%, not 10.
Yep.
I was like, oh. So that, I learned that one.
Yeah.
You can't, no matter how good this person is, they're still the engineer and they're doing engineering stuff and they're not watching.
And their heads down. Forest
and
for
their
the
heads
trees.
down, as it should be. They're not doing your job. You got to do your job.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. My worst.
That was hard.
My worst one that's very similar.
It was just, oh my God, that was hard.
My worst one that's so similar to that is I was the engineer and the PM. And I had a client I really liked, and we were life-saving technology, just the coolest medical technology ever. And the project had been going to that point at rocket speed. I knew the client before they found this technology, another tech transfer out of university. So my contact became the EIR in residence and became the CEO. And I like this guy, and we start working on it. And we go from first check to start development to functional animal testing that works in, I think, 6 weeks. Like I just we got lucky that the concept idea worked, and I built this prototype that did the thing, and they put it into a cat on Thursday, and it did the thing. So raised a bunch of money. And the next couple of phases go really well. Go through, get some SBIR funding, phase 1s and phase 2s. But all of a sudden, right before human clinical, we get some rubber that starts meeting the road. Some engineering challenges that I was convinced we could solve with time and money. And it was my first lesson, asymptotal approach to solution, where you actually once you solve the core math all the way down, there's never a solution. But you're really close. You're only off by like 10%, but you're not going to make your metric. But you didn't understand the core complexity of, insert complex system here. That every week you could make 10% progress towards your goal from where you were.
But you're not going to.
But you're never going to get there because asymptotal sucks. And so you keep telling yourself and your client, like, you're going to make it. We're going to get there. It's going to be fine. And the timeline starts really getting tight. And I finally had to call it. And it was just too late to save the relationship. And like all on me, my PM,
Yep.
I was the engineer.
Yep.
And very first lesson in modeling asymptotal approach, so you can catch it one iteration loop in or 2, not, oh man, we are now so close, but we're still never gonna get there.
Wow.
Just start modeling that decreasing approach percentage. And that is something I model all the time. We have any hard physics we're working on now, graph this.
Yeah, that's the kind of response that I want to.
So I get hired.
I think you've proven your worth in that particular realm, Grant.
But again, you only get that by bruises.
I think
it's hard.
The thing I'm walking away with this is when you win, it's we. When you lose, it's me.
Oh, that's good.
I like that.
Everybody, this is the Hardtech podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.